Eli Turner had never been much for company. His cabin, nestled at the foot of the Colorado foothills, was far from any town or settlement. It was a place of solitude, where he could live out the days without the interruptions of civilization. He preferred it that way, quiet, simple, and distant from the ever-turbulent world of the frontier. But that morning, as the first blush of dawn painted the sky in pale hues of pink and gold, the peace of his world was shattered by a sound that didn't belong, a faint rustling at the door. Eli's hand tightened around the axe handle he was using to split logs. His instincts kicked in immediately. He didn't believe in coincidences on the frontier. If someone was at his door at this hour, it wasn't by chance. He set the axe down slowly, listening. There was no other sound, just the steady hum of the wind through the pines. A second later, the faint creak of the door opening reached his ears. Eli moved swiftly, crossing the threshold into the doorway of his small cabin. And there, standing on the other side, was a girl. She was small, barely more than a teenager, with wild eyes that gleamed in the dim light. Her face was streaked with dirt and blood, and her clothes were torn, a faded dress that hung loosely from her slender frame. She had the look of someone who had been running for a long time, too long. Eli's heart skipped a beat. He had seen enough of the world to know trouble when it showed up on his doorstep. And this girl standing in front of him was trouble. But there was something in her eyes, a mixture of fear, desperation, and resolve, that made him pause. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, her gaze darted around the clearing as if expecting someone to be close behind her. Eli looked past her but saw nothing. No riders, no horses, not even the faintest outline of movement in the woods. For a moment, the only sound was the faint rustling of the trees and the distant call of a bird. Eli stepped forward, his voice rough from the years of solitude. "What are you doing here, girl?" Her lips trembled, but she didn't answer. She looked like she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. She held her ground, though, her shoulders squared as though bracing for whatever might come next. He could see she was injured now. Her arm was bound in makeshift cloth, a bloodstain seeping through. Her eyes flickered toward the ground. And that's when Eli saw the small, bloodied knife she gripped in her right hand. He took another step forward, keeping his voice calm, measured. "You're hurt. Let me help you." The girl shook her head, eyes wild. "No," she whispered, her voice hoarse. I need to hide." Eli furrowed his brow. "Hide from who? Who's chasing you?" he asked. But she just glanced over her shoulder as if expecting something or someone to come out of the shadows. Her breath quickened, and in the tension that followed, Eli could feel his own pulse pick up pace. The wind shifted. The first light of dawn had barely begun to spill across the mountains when Eli noticed it, the sound. At first it was so faint that he almost dismissed it, the natural hum of the wind or the rustling of the trees. But as he continued his morning chores, feeding the chickens, checking the fence line, scraping the last remnants of frost from his weathered tools, the noise grew clearer. It was a drumbeat, low, slow, deliberate. The steady rhythm thudded through the air like a pulse, distant but undeniable. The hair on the back of Eli's neck prickled, and his heart skipped a beat. That sound, he knew it too well. Comanche. Eli wiped his hands on his pants and stood still for a moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The plains stretched out before him, a vast sea of grass, empty and open, but he could feel the air shift, the quiet before the storm. The drums were getting louder now, no longer a distant echo but a clear, rhythmic summons. His pulse quickened. 70 warriors, he thought, maybe more. 100 scenarios played out in his mind, each worse than the last. The Comanche were known for their raids, and the sound of drums meant a war party was on the move. But why? He hadn't heard any reports of skirmishes in the area, no word of an ambush, no sign of unrest. It didn't make sense. Then, as if on cue, the girl appeared at the cabin door again, her face drawn with anxiety. Her eyes wide and alert scanned the distance, following the sound of the drums with a tension Eli could feel in his own chest. "They come," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but it held an eerie calm. Eli didn't need her to elaborate. He knew what she meant. The war party, her father's warriors, were already on the move. "What do you mean they come? Why?" Eli asked, though part of him already feared the answer. The girl's lips parted, but she seemed to struggle for words. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to hold it steady. "My father, he's the chief of the Comanche. He'll come for me, for sheltering me here. Eli's stomach dropped. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. In his years on the frontier, Eli had heard plenty of stories about the wrath of the Comanche. If they wanted something or someone, they would stop at nothing to get it. And Eli knew the rules of the land. Shelter a Comanche, and you'd bring war to your doorstep. They'll come for you, Eli muttered under his breath, more to himself than to her. His fingers twitched at the rifle resting against the wall. But he knew it would be useless. 70 Comanche riders against one man with a rifle? It didn't matter how good a shot he was. He wouldn't stand a chance. The girl's eyes flicked nervously to the horizon again, her chest rising and falling with the same anxiety Eli could feel growing in his own gut. They will not stop, she said, her voice barely audible. I will not be spared. Eli turned to her, his expression hardening. He'd lived through raid. The morning had barely broken when Eli first saw them, dozens of figures on horseback, like dark shapes against the lightening sky, galloping across the plains. The low rhythmic beat of the war drums still echoed in the distance, but it was now joined by the unmistakable thunder of hooves. The Comanche had arrived. Eli stood motionless at the edge of his property, watching them approach. His heart raced, adrenaline surging as the realization hit him. The girl had been right. The storm was upon him. There was no turning back now. The girl, his reluctant guest, stood beside him, her face a mask of dread, though her eyes were sharp with an unmistakable resolve. Father's coming, she whispered, as if the words were both a warning and a final farewell. He's leading them. Eli nodded but didn't take his eyes off the riders. He could see the chief now, his broad shoulders easily recognizable, sitting tall in the saddle. His posture was commanding, every movement deliberate. Behind him were the warriors, each one mounted on a fleet-footed horse, their faces painted with streaks of war paint. They were a terrifying sight. Every one of them trained for battle, deadly with their bows and spears. 70 riders, Eli estimated, though it was hard to be sure from this distance. The wind carried their presence to him in waves, a palpable sense of danger that seemed to make the air itself heavier. They weren't here for conversation, and they weren't here for negotiation. This was a war party, and they had a singular purpose. Eli turned to the girl. She had her arms crossed over her chest, her stance as stiff as the old oak trees that lined the edge of his land. They'll stop here, won't they? She asked, though her voice trembled with uncertainty. They'll stop when I make them stop, Eli replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. He knew it was a lie. There was no stopping them now. But he wasn't about to show fear, not now. The girl's gaze flickered to the cabin behind them. They won't listen to you, not if you try to fight them. I'm not planning on fighting them, Eli said, though his grip tightened on the rifle that hung at his side. But I will give them a reason to think twice. He had to make a stand. Not because he was sure he could win, but because he couldn't let them walk over him without a fight. He couldn't let them think they could come and go as they pleased, taking what they wanted whenever they wanted. His land, his home, it had to mean something, and he wasn't going to lose it without trying to defend it. The Comanche riders approached steadily, their horses kicking up the dry earth with each pounding step. The girl stepped back, her face pale, but her eyes remained fixed on the riders. Her father's figure was becoming clearer now, and Eli could see the weight of his presence in the way the other warriors stayed in formation behind him, waiting for his orders. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here for one thing, a